The human is a very plastic creature. And so what you feed it, what you're doing, the baby will adapt to that, right? So that's called epigenetics and those kind of things. And we're really not we're going to readapt right now to live in a high sugar world, not moving as much, and that's what you're seeing. We're changing as humans, and who knows what the human's going to look like. The kids today are sicker, and almost everyone's a special ed teacher right now because the kids are having more and more issues. So we're all not seeing the same thing here. We're not all seeing the kids having all these issues, and we're just going to keep doing the same plan here. You got to build the house the right way. And if you don't build it the right way, you'll be doing repairs forever. And if you build it the right way, that kid will be resilient and fly away.
Dr. Gabriel, it's a pleasure to see you again.
Yeah, Brett. Happy you came to my parts, came out to Brooklyn, so it's great to see you again. It's been a few years.
I think the last time I saw you was at one of the festivals or foundations that you do.
Yeah, this year we just had our 12th year of the Healthy Path Foundation. So it's something we started 12 years ago because a bunch of us concerned citizens in Brooklyn were seeing the rates of chronic disease in children, ADHD being one of those things, affected 1 in 4 kids at that time. And that was 12 years ago. And our mission was to try to do some things from just doing like our top 10 list of healthy habits to try to get kids to change their eating habits and get off the screens, go out and play, those kind of things. Then unfortunately COVID happened, and now it's probably 2 out of 3 kids. So about 60% of kids have chronic disease now. And so we're trying to start these kids clubs where the kids in schools are trying to start clubs to try to advocate for themselves to get healthier. So
how do you think COVID played into it growing even more?
Well, a place like Brooklyn, for example, my family's up in Connecticut, but in Brooklyn here, my patients, some of them didn't leave an apartment for 2 years. So being home, not going to school, not socializing, I think the increase in screen time, so not moving, so we then changed our whole approach. Instead of this top 10 list of eat fruits and vegetables and drink water and those kind of things, we looked at really like blue zones and say, okay, why are those guys healthy? So why is it Greece or Italy or Japan? Certainly there's 5 places in the world where they live to over 100. We have the most, the highest percentage of people who are over 100. And we try to say, okay, what made them successful? And number one, they just don't eat a lot of additives and, chemicals and all those things in their foods. And they've been eating the same food for hundreds of years. Number 2, they move. So movement is just part of their daily routine. It's not just playing a sport. And then, they're part of a community and part of, something bigger than themselves. And then when you can do 1 through 3, then you have your purpose in life. And when you're sitting in your apartment, not doing things for 2 years, they really lacked purpose. And I think that affected the kids, not just physically, but on a whole emotional level. And we realized there's more to school than just the learning part. There's a whole socialization part that a lot of kids missed out. And I think that's from babies to elderly, everybody was super affected. Because as humans, we're social active creatures, and locking us up, not being social, not being active has really affected the kids.
I think it's interesting that you say that there's been less movement in Brooklyn and New York, because I always think when I think of the United States, I think of New York as one of the places where people do walk around a little bit more because it's so much harder to get around in driving and traffic. When I think of suburban United States, I'm at home, I go somewhere in a car, and then if I'm not doing that, then I'm not moving. But here, am I wrong?
Well, I think at that point there was a mass exodus out of cities because they wanted to go where there was space, so you can do that whole 6 feet apart thing. So we were there you can go out to fields and find places. We're here, it's not as readily available to do that. So I think definitely affected kids in the city a little bit more.
That did change things a lot.
And there's just more people, so everyone's on top of each other, and at that point things changed a little bit. But yeah.
But you do typically think of, especially when you think of Europe, people moving around more and how important just movement is.
Yeah, the food is cleaner, so it has less chemicals and whatnot in it, but their movements is part of their routine. So the grandmas in Italy or Greece are living to 100 because they're in the garden. Mm-hmm. They're going shopping. They're praying. So in Italy, there's one area, the further you live, the further church is from your house, the longer you live because the more steps you have to go up. So, so I think just movement is, that's just changed. And kids aren't moving as much. They've taken a lot of that out of schools. So a lot of the schools in the city, they don't have gym. They may have gym once a week. They don't have recess. So that's kind of hard. And so I just find kids are either doing a million activities or they're not doing, a lot at all. And they're just sitting in front of screen time. And I think that was a staggering, statistic that when we were children, 25% of our day was spent with our family. 23% of the time was with your friends. So it's about half of the day with either family or friends. Now kids are probably over 60% of times in front of screens. And I don't think that's helped, the focusing, the anxiety,
no, it does
ADD
not.
And all that.
I was going to joke and say now they're with friends and family. They're sitting next to their family on their phones with their friends, but all much more in a detrimental way, I think.
Yeah, it's a new form of socialization. So
it's unlike any other time in history, I think. In no other time did people were able to feel meaningful connection with a relationship by sitting at a screen. Like you had to like be involved in life and doing things.
Right. And now, get to AI and all that, where that's going to take things. But right. So what is the meaning of life? What are the humans going to do if the machines are doing more? So I think, and the world is changing so quickly for our kids, and it's even like tell them like what type of job to get, what's your purpose in life, what are you going to do? I think so many jobs are being lost now because of AI. It's hard to guide kids in what you should be doing, what direction.
I worry about that all the time. It's like I try and think of like what. I actually asked my son. I said, "What job is AI proof?" And his answer was a professional sports athlete, because like no one's going to want to watch robots. But it's like, I just thought it was funny because it's like, don't rely on professional sports. That's not going to be a career. You got to do something else. But now it's like, well, that's the only thing left. So go for professional sports. And that's a lot of movement.
But my older guys were looking at colleges, and there were gamers. They had scholarships for that.
That's so bizarre.
So that was like, okay, this is something different. So I was telling all these kids, like, how are you going to make a living gaming? And some kids are doing very well doing that. So I guess you have to be careful on what advice you give kids.
Well, what is fascinating to me, because, I want to know what's going on in my kid's life, even though I don't understand it. And I remember when they were little and they would watch like Fortnite and people playing Fortnite and commenting on it. Like, yeah. How are you entertained by this? Because like, I want to play the game. Strangely, I did come to understand that. I tried one video game with my son. It was Ghost of Tsushima, and it's, katanas in Japan, and it's just amazing how good it is. That like, sure enough, I'm on YouTube watching how to do it. It's bizarre.
Yeah, no, I think I had Atari as a kid. That came out that time. And
yeah.
It was like ding, ding. It wasn't, you did it for a while and it wasn't so addicting. We were going to go outside and play. But, I think there was a trust for us to be outside all day, and we were just come home for dinner kind of thing. But at some point that's changed, especially here in the city. I think there's this fear, and a lot of parents feel more comfortable with their kids in their bedroom than being outside now. Because I think that fear has driven a lot of, different things in our society, especially in New York. I'm seeing in America, it's just a big thing. Just to get people on eyeballs and screens, they just use fear as that. And especially they've scared a lot of the moms in this country since about 2009, where they don't let their kids go outside. The other thing we see a lot more as a pediatrician, where kids aren't on their bellies as much because of SIDS and the fear of that. So they're on their backs all day, so they're not getting core strength, and they're not having tummy time as much, and that's what causing retained primitive reflexes, which then we see kids aren't as good in sports because of that. That leads to a lot more processing issues, ADD, focusing issues, and all that.
Can you go back again? Because I heard that late. They're not as good as in sports because...
So I had a producer, he comes to me in my new integrative practice, and I had mentioned that to him, and he was... doing a movie here in Brooklyn about the 80s and kids playing stickball. And he goes, none of the kids in the street could throw a ball or hit the ball because they don't throw properly. They don't throw, normally they just throw like this because they have no core strength because they didn't spend time on their bellies. So there's this company called Brain Balance, and one day, I have some children with ADD and pandas and these other things. And we were just talking, like, what do you do? Like, what is brain balance? And it was just fascinating. They're trying to achieve the same thing I try to achieve through supplements and nutrition, but they're doing it all through getting rid of primitive reflexes. And then you see
what reflexes?
So when you're a baby on your back, there's something called the Moro reflex. Okay, so when you're on your back all day, because you spent no time on your belly, because before the whole SIDS thing, everyone was told we all slept on our bellies. And we had a good core strength. We're doing push-ups, so looking around, making eye contact. Okay, that's gone now because parents are sort of scared if I have my kid on their belly at all, that they're going to die of SIDS. So they do no tummy time. They all have, there's a whole helmet industry, torticollis, neck industry, but this reflex doesn't go away. But now you're 12, you're 15. We're going to call it ADD. We're going to call it processing, learning issues and all that. So Brain Balance is a company that gets rid of that, those reflexes. And there's a guy named Dr. Melillo who's got these books about, he started Brain Balance, but he has these centers in the city where if you don't move as a baby, you're not rolling, crawling, those reflexes don't go away. And those are called retained primitive reflexes, but that part of your brain doesn't develop.
That's really interesting.
So a lot of these things are died early on in life. If you're not moving in mom's belly, if you're not moving as a baby, that part of your brain doesn't develop. So what we saw after COVID, you sat down for 2 years on a screen doing this, you're developing 2 fingers. You're telling your brain, I don't need to use these other 4 fingers. And then kids became nearsighted because they weren't outside looking at the horizon. So your brain early on will change in its development based on what you do. The human is a very plastic creature. And so what you feed it, what you're doing, you'll adapt to that, right? So that's called epigenetics and those kind of things. And we're really not we're going to readapt right now to live in a high sugar world, not moving as much. And that's what you're seeing. We're changing as humans. And who knows what the human's going to look like in 100 years, 1,000 years, it's going to change compared to what we're doing now. So
that's really interesting because a lot of other integrative medical practitioners that I've talked with incorporate movement into it, but I never really understood more than that just seemed healthy. That's really interesting.
But I asked Dr. Mo, so what is it? You have all these centers with kids who have all these issues, you're changing their brains. So what's the problem? I'm a pediatrician. I want to fix it from the beginning. He said, they're just not moving as babies. They're not rolling, they're not crawling. So that part of the brain doesn't develop. So they may have the right side of their brain a lot stronger than the left side because of that. And then you have a disconnect. And then we call it ADD and all that. So
are there issues with today's culture and society beyond just as an infant into the toddler years that exacerbate that or continue that? Or is it that issue mostly just as an infant?
Oh, yeah, but if you can't do things as an infant, then you need therapies and all of that. Let me give PT and OT. But they're not really fixing the brain issue. They're just it's a Band-Aid. We do a lot of Band-Aids in America. It's just like ADD and so they'll have ADD now and they may have retained primitive reflexes. Okay, they could be nutrient deficient. So we look at so there's a lot of different ways of treating it. So, I work with I have a whole village of people that I work with, I love your company because it, accentuate, fills the void of those things. And I have your little card on the wall. And I love now that you've changed the 3 things because you just point those 3 things out. Like, you need the omegas, you need the minerals, and you need methylated B vitamins. And that's basically the cornerstone of what I do. But I do it from babies. I'm not waiting until they have ADD. I just give them all from birth.
Now, I really like one of the things that I noticed in preparing for the podcast is that you're one of the, a lot of the pediatric practices that I visit are affiliated with a hospital network or some other larger network, and your practice is family-based, or it's one of the only family-based around Brooklyn?
Yeah. I mean, my father started this in the 60s, but you have to understand, my dad did what he thought was best. And he adapted based on what he saw. And, and that's, I'm a biology major, so I just observe. You see what's working, what's not. The problem is if you sit and wait for the government or people to come out, and you find there's a lot of bias with some of their research and everything. So I just do what I think is working the best. And you keep changing. What I tell people today is very different than I said 2 years ago. Extremely different than when I came out of residency, because we weren't ready to deal with the problems that we're seeing. And it wasn't until I went to a functional medicine, which is called DAN conference years ago, when I had some children who I couldn't get better, but they went to a functional medicine doctor who was funny. I was hired to replace her in Connecticut. This is how the world works. It's, I came out of residency. I hired, her name is Nancy O'Hara up in Connecticut. And she did this medicine where she spent a lot of time with the patients and went over nutrition, this crazy kind of medicine. So I never had met her until I had a couple of kids with autism, and I sent them to her. I go, look, your kids have a little bit of lead. We can't really treat that in New York. Why don't you go see this lady? And they came back and they changed their diets and went on some supplements, and they were, speaking 6 months later. So they went from completely autistic to speaking. And then I said, look, I have to learn more about this. And I went to this conference called Defeat Autism Now, and it was run by doctors whose children were on the spectrum.
How long ago was that?
17 years ago.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So this isn't a surprise.
16 years ago, yeah.
I think a lot of...
son was 2. And I called my wife at noon, and I'm like, get him off cow's milk now. And 3 weeks later, he used to poop a baby once a week. And he didn't have allergies. He just had a really bad sensitivities. Again, something we're not trained about that. Then putting him on some probiotics, changing his diet, put him on some vitamins, and all of a sudden he's a different cat. He's speaking, his skin cleared up, other things. And he was never really diagnosed with anything, but you could see it was affecting him. So you learn more medicine. I sat there going, oh my God, like, why are they not teaching us this? So I learned more medicine in one weekend. I also didn't tell anyone there I was a pediatrician, because they would have probably killed me because they were so pissed at their pediatrician for not listening. And I think it's not really, it's just that all this stuff is not part of our training. We have a disease-based model. This is normal. This is not normal. And once it's not normal, this is what we're going to do. And usually it's medication, surgery, something like that. There's very little nutrition training from us.
No, but I like a couple of things that you said that, and the reason why I pointed out that you have your own practice and you're not affiliated with a hospital or some other practice is a lot of the doctors that I've talked to that are affiliated with a hospital, they're like, I love these nutrients. I know that these are helpful for people that are struggling with ADHD or autism or other mental health issues, but I can't recommend this unless it comes from approval from the rest of the hospital. And so they're really kind of like more technicians, I think, than doctors. And when you say, my master's degree was in molecular biology as well. So I'm like, scientist, sure. Try it out. Like, if it works, cool. If it doesn't, nutrients are the side effects and the risk associated with nutrients are less than other treatments.
Yeah, they just don't have good lobbyists. I think that's the problem. Right? Yeah, but we just saw we did a fundraiser with the foundation, and basically we had the Amish people came there and brought their milk. Right? They have no allergies, no autism, no ADD, none. But
that's a good control sample.
Yeah. So why is it they have it? Because their soil, and they have other sects similar to them that use pesticides, and then they have those issues. So it just goes down to basics. What's the bread we're eating? Our food, it's missing minerals. So the government right now is talking about that. Like, pollution is demineralizing the earth. So what you learned over COVID, if your vitamin D and zinc were low, you didn't do so hot. And they should have at that point. And this is the misstep of COVID. Everybody was sitting arguing, about the treatments and vaccines or not. But really, we should have been like, well, the young people did really well up till about 30. And then the 60-year-olds and older got pretty sick. But what about those 30 to 60-year-olds? Why did they get so sick in some cases? And a lot of it to me, and I went to this integrative health conference, and the point was, like, you decide how you age. So there's some 30-year-olds who are like 60-year-olds, and there's some 60-year-olds who are like 30-year-olds because of how they're eating. Are they taking supplements? Are they doing these different things to stay young? So aging is in our control. But you have to understand it. But these are not things that were taught, in regular, medical school. These are like integrated doctors, and they're talking about that. But the sad thing that I will say at this conference was that there's very few pediatricians there. So maybe in 4 or 5 of us that were there were pediatricians.
Is there a reason why they weren't there?
Well, everybody else is into anti-aging. So it is people of our generation who, that's where the focus is. Maybe that's where the money's at, and people want to stay young, but it's very hard to see. Like again, with those numbers, it went from 25% of kids with chronic disease to over 60. That's unsustainable. I saw some speech therapists today in the office, and they were like, and they've been doing this for over 10 years. The kids today are sicker, and almost everyone's a special ed teacher right now because the kids are having more and more issues. COVID was part of it, but again, the less contact, what's in our food, the lack of nutrients. That's why some kids go on Accentrate, and it's like amazing, especially the kids with ADD, because there was this book written years ago by her name is McCandless, and it was about for autistic kids. She called it The Starving Brain. So these kids are just missing nutrients, and you give them those nutrients, it's amazing how well they do. That's why a lot of autistic kids lick, because they're looking for minerals. Now they'll pick up lead and all the other stuff in the environment too, but they have no zinc, they have no iron. So you put them on a multi-mineral, and it's amazing that they do well. That's why I like your product, because it has, again, the omegas, minerals, and methylated B12, which is huge, those three things that they all have to be on.
And when you look at like underdeveloped countries, they're almost all malnourished, and a lot of efforts in the Western world trying to help the underdeveloped world get healthier and more prosperous is nutrition, and getting the right nutrition, and not getting omegas, minerals, and vitamins. And when my son was diagnosed with ADHD, we wanted to make sure that his body was the healthiest. Like, is he healthy? Is he moving? Does he have all the nutrients that he needs? And that kind of went down a rabbit hole. I had been working in omega-3 fatty acids. I'm a patent attorney, wrote many patent applications with omega-3s in the most bioavailable form to the brain, methylated folate. And so I kind of knew what nutrients were helpful for dopamine regulation. But on your website, you have something that's like food is medicine, or
I'm Greek, so that's the OG.
I'm messing up the quote. I just know that like food is medicine, and the way that I think of it is the nutrients that we eat are literally the building blocks that our body uses and that our neurons use. So if there's something wrong with the food that we're eating, then it makes sense that the machine's not going to work properly.
Right. Well, exactly. But what is food is changed,
Right.
So, and what's interesting, and that we go back to that blue zones, in Japan they eat purple yam. They're not eating that in Greece. They're not eating that in Italy. And some are eating carbs, some eating protein, but through epigenetics, that methylation, which the folate and B12 do, you're able to change over time with your local ingredients, through evolution and how you deal with the world around you. So I think the answer may be different for everybody depending on where you come from as far as nutrition goes, but our food is devoid of that. So the Amish still have it because they're still, in the dirt there. So they have the bacteria in the dirt with them is one still. And also their food is, they're getting probiotics and other things right from the milk. So it's not, their milk's not lasting for 3 months. It goes bad in a week. So it's all the processing and all the things that we're doing are affecting. And then really our kids are just missing sort of, basic building blocks. And the little baby turns over. So, baby this morning, 7 pounds, they're going to triple that. So how many times are you turning over? So those building blocks are super important. And we have to make sure you have the right nutrients. But who's focusing on that? That's part of the, it's part of the issue. And I personally think the vitamin Accentrate, every mom should be on when they're pregnant. And you want to go beyond that, everybody before they have kids should be on that.
We're actually doing a prenatal Accentrate that because of the new omega-3 that we've switched over to with Lysoveta, that is the form that has been found in the placenta, and it's highly expressed in with the fetus. And so we do intend on having a prenatal so that they're getting the omegas. And when you look at the omega, mineral, and vitamin components, most important vitamins for a pregnant woman is folate for the neurotube.
Methylfolate.
Right,
So
right.
this is the problem in this country: is 2/3 of people can't use folate, and the one we're giving is a synthetic form of it. And a lot of people get postpartum or they can't tolerate it. And we're seeing a lot of this, we're doing this FRAT testing now, which is folate receptor antibodies they're getting, probably because that folate's building. I was talking to the people who do the test. We had dinner with them a couple of weeks ago, and they think it's because of all this synthetic folate they're just pumping into our food and spraying with things. And a lot of people have MTHFR. And it's probably one of the biggest things. I have never heard of that until I came to Brooklyn, and there was an OB here. Dr. Gafinis has written a great book called The Working Womb. You know, his goal in life is having beautiful placentas. He goes, Mike, I have the most beautiful placentas, you know. And he's so proud of his placenta. You take the baby, give me the placenta. Because before that, women who had MTHFR were having miscarriages, and he would get them pregnant through Lovenox. And there's just a blood thinner. Then over time, he evolved his practice and said, no, I'm going to give him all these vitamins. He's going to give him, you know, beets and eggs. And he loves choline because they need the fat for their brain development. So all that is so super important. And it's all about blood flow to the placenta, right? We go back to movement. If the babies are restricted and have a small placenta, they're not moving. And if you're not moving in the womb, that affects your brain development. So we have to keep going back. But the problem is, who talks about placental health in this country?
This is the first I've heard of it.
So who talks about moving in the womb? These are things that should be just, you know, if we all focus on placenta health and what the mom and baby ate before they're born, you'd get rid of 50% of the disease, I bet you, in this country.
Well, and the methylfolate is so important because that's the active form, and that's the form that crosses the blood-brain barrier. One of the very first patents that I did, I kind of feel like Forrest Gump in a way, because like my legal patent career just floated like the feather in the wind from omegas to folate to iron things. But I've touched on all these nutrients that ended up helping my son. But the first patent that I did was for an inventor whose wife had a thyroid issue. And so she was taking a thyroid medication that blocked folate metabolism in the brain. And they had twins, and they were underdeveloped, and they could not figure out like what was the issue. When they realized that their cerebral folate levels were low, got them on L-methylfolate, and they almost became normal overnight. Like, it was really fast. And so the patent application was this thyroid drug with L-methylfolate, so that if you're going to inhibit folate metabolism, you at least supplement with the L-methylfolate. But it is a very important nutrient that, you know, if people ate leafy green vegetables and real food, then you wouldn't have to rely on the folic acid that's been fortified in the grains.
Right, no, exactly. Yeah, these guys are using leucovorin now, which is folinic acid, the step before. Because I use MTHFR, but some of the kids just can't tolerate that. So it's interesting. We're looking at that now. And so again, we're trying different things and meeting, you know, since I changed my practice now to this integrative medicine. So it's just, I've had more time to go to conferences and to focus more on these things because, you know, medicine, unfortunately, is just a broken system. You spend all this money, yet we have the worst outcomes. You know, education too, we can go down that, you know, rabbit hole, but we can avoid that. But it's all related, I mean, to the ADD, and, you know, there's a lot of like how we're educating the kids too, I think, is affecting them as well. So I don't think it's all just you're missing vitamins, but what are we doing with the males in this country? How are we educating them? You know, making them sit there like, you know, girls can handle that, but a lot of boys need that time to movement, and it's very, very important for them. So I think we have to look at all those things. But education and medicine, number one in the world by far in money spent, probably the worst in outcome. So we have to relook at that a little bit and say, you know, how can we do better, and just relook at things a little bit.
Well, it's interesting you said leucovorin, because L-methylfolate is an expensive ingredient, and leucovorin is about a third or a fourth of the cost. So one of the ways we were thinking about making Accentrate more affordable is splitting the L-methylfolate in half. So half of the folate is leucovorin, half of it is L-methylfolate.
So me and that guy we talked about that night. We met. I was like, dude, we got to make leucovorin with L-methylfolate.
Well,
okay. You have to have a percentage.
Yeah.
Some kids can't handle it, and you know, but that's probably the thing that we have to sort of come up with, because I think some people probably may need a mix of it. You know,
well,
because leucovorin, then you get the neurotransmitters, and there is. Did you say like BH4? Did you ever look into that? years ago.
I had years ago. We had not for this.
Yeah, we used it years ago, but then it became so expensive because somebody bought I guess they use it for a medication, and they've sort of cornered the market, and it's very, very expensive. But you go more down that pathway by using leucovorin. So it's something that we just set, I don't know, we probably set 10 off this frat testing the last couple of weeks, just to see, what that shows up. But they think about 2/3 of kids on the spectrum, we use a lot of pandas, probably ADD have that, that receptor, and then they would benefit from high doses of leucovorin. So we'll see. Again,
well, the other thing are you familiar with Dr. Arnold? He speaks at a lot of the AACAP, the pediatric conventions, and he talks a lot about nutrition. I talked to him a bit. I wanted him to do a study on Accentrate before we switched the omegas, and he was looking at it like the choice of nutrients, but you do what a lot of people do and you focus in on folate, B12, and B6. There's this article by Kennedy a while back that is basically the B vitamins work in a concert. If you're deficient in B2 or B5, it doesn't matter how much folate and B6 you're getting because you have a rate limiting factor in those cycles. So you need to provide at least the daily amount of B vitamins for all of them. So that's one of the things that we did with the change in the neuro products is that it does have more folate. It doesn't have more. It has a high dose of folate, B12, and B6, but it gives all of them and vitamin C because that's used in the cycles as well.
Yeah, look, I check homocysteine and methylmalonic acid, so I micromanage the B12 and methylfolate. And some kids need a sprinkle of methylfolate. Other kids I have on 40 milligrams. So everyone's very different how they use it. So I think you have to test for that and see. And every 6 months you look at that and you adjust it.
No,
so that's functional medicine, and it's not one size fits all. Unfortunately, in 2025 in this country, we're still doing one size fits all. And if that pathway is not working right, you're not going to do well. You may have allergies, you may get some other disease, but your epigenetics are not going to do well. And a more and more toxic environment, we have to all understand that that's what's happening, plastics and chemicals and pollution and all these, It's funny, everyone at this conference is from like San Francisco. So we're the one guy from Brooklyn. like we're the epicenter here. New York City, New Jersey is the epicenter of a lot of disease because of the toxicity level in the air and pollution and whatnot. So we have a lot of, patients, and you can see a big difference when you adjust for those things and do that. So
I've always thought that the doctors that go through it and test for all the nutrient levels. Accentrate was a one size fits all. That was a great shotgun approach for people that don't do that. But I'm just really grateful to know and associate with doctors that do the testing like you do, because you get down to the heart of what they really need. And it's a very tailored, personalized approach, which is what we're trying to get to with breaking them up so that it can be more tailored and personalized. But we can never do what. Yeah,
but I use mineral with, I use a multi-mineral. It's not just 2 or 3. It has, and then you can, do they need more iron or not, so you can tailor those things. But I see a lot of people come to me and they're like, oh, they're on zinc. They're on magnesium, they're on 2 or 3 things, but they don't have all the Bs like you're saying. So I think you have to be on a multi-mineral, a multivitamin, and an omega. At this conference, it's like, so us as adults, if you take vitamin D and omega every day, you're going to have 40 to 50% less chronic disease. If you manage to exercise twice a week, get your heart going up a little bit, you can get that up to 60% less chronic disease. So these are easy things that you can do. So now my integrated practice, where you're like, okay, did you get your vitamin D today? Open your mouth. We're going to give you vitamin D. We're going to give you omegas. I'm trying to get my staff healthier, because in the previous system, they just had you working morning to night, and it just didn't, and your staff wasn't healthy. No one's healthy. So it's about, having this healthy environment. There's little things you can do. And you can see like West Virginia this week just came out with those blue zones that I was talking about. They said, okay, we're going to get the artificial colors and dyes out. We're going to make everybody try to walk a mile a day, and try to get people to have a purpose in life. And if you're on the SNAP program, you can't buy junk. They're going to make it, more nutritious, the choices you have. So hopefully the government, without, putting a gun to your head to tell you have to do this and that, because I don't think that's going to work in America, well, at least take out the things that we know in other countries are just not healthy for the kids. These colors and dyes and all the added sugar and all that. And I think that's really, the other part we have to go through is like the energy, right? So like the baby's brain is made out of two things, cholesterol and omega-3. It's made out of fat. But what's scary is I had a 9-year-old last week whose cholesterol was very low and she's almost pre-diabetic. And I'm like, look, sweetie, you got to eat more fat. She's like, what, fat? That's bad for me, right? Right away. I'm like, so there's brainwashing. And,
it's really old. Like, I know that in the 70s and 80s, it was, we don't want to get fat, so we cut fat. And then it turns out that it's the sugar amount and insulin and not being able to metabolize glucose and regulate that. And it's not the fat. You can go on a pretty high fat diet and a low sugar diet, and that's the best way to burn fat for a lot of people. And
your focus is going to be a lot better.
Yeah. Well, because especially when you start, so I did intermittent fasting for a while, high protein, healthy fats, not eating breakfast, and then your body's making ketones and you're fueling your brain with ketones in the morning. I was like wider awake than having coffee or anything.
Yeah, but I think that's another. So again, I think giving fish oil is super important, but not starting your day with carbs is really important too. And most kids who do that, they spike their sugar and then they're crashing about 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. And Johnny's not sitting in his chair anymore, then they get sent to the office to go medicate them. But a lot of it has to do with what they're eating.
And food can actually taste really good. I think you may be the only doctor I've seen that has like recipes on the website. And I was taking notes at like some of the recipes and I was like, these look really good. I'm making the salmon this week and the blueberry pudding and stuff. Like if you use real foods in a healthy way,
So we've changed how I feed babies in the office. So we used to come at 3 months, the kids were eating cereals and eating fruit. So what's the first 2 foods we gave them? Carb and carb. And a lot of the formulas have a lot more carbs in them. It's it's a lot sweeter than, let's say, breast milk is. So the kids are addicted to sugar early on. So now that you start with vegetables, you get more protein, fats early on. The kids are leaner. They're much more focused, especially if you start giving them vitamins. So you're not waiting until they have ADD symptoms, just give it to them from day one. So we do a multivitamin that has methyl B12 in it. We do an omega-3. Probiotics, I would say, is probably the one thing that's critical that, I think for gut health. So we can get a lot into that, but that's your gut-brain connection is very, very important. That's the only thing I would say you probably have to add to your your formula. I don't know.
We had a probiotic and we put a lot of work into sourcing the strains that had the most, every ingredient we've ever used has to have some scientific backing. And there was a lot of science behind a Lactobacillus plantarum strain for helping regulate dopamine. And then after we got that product up and running, the supplier decided they wanted to do their own branded product themselves. So we weren't able to buy it from them. We hope to get back to a probiotic, but I think real food's better. And so I use sauerkraut where I can. Sure. I've never understood how to make it. I don't know where it comes from. And then I saw yours on the website and that just looks delicious. So I'm going to be doing that one as well.
Yeah, but a lot of the almond, their food is just right. So it's right from the cow, it has, so if you're getting that milk. Now in New York, you can't say that because raw milk is technically not legal here. So, so you have to get it for your cat or dog or something like that. So they sell it for the pets. But it's, but again, we have to go back to eating, whole foods. The issue is here. So let's go back. So when I first came to New York, so I practiced in Connecticut for a year, didn't have any issues with the kids, very few calls at night. First night I call when I was working here in Brooklyn and Staten Island, it's every other call is a baby vomiting. Vomit, puke, reflux, I'm like, kid after kid, I'm like, what is going on down here? Like such a difference in it too. So, being the biology major, I'm like, I got to figure what's going on here. So I just did a retrospective study in the office and it turned out, the mode of delivery made a difference. So so maybe it's all about the mom's flora then. So this is 20 years ago, not in times now. So if the baby was born via C-section, if mom had antibiotics during the pregnancy, or if she had a yeast infection, those kids had not necessarily reflux, they just had something wrong with the stool, either constipation or diarrhea. That's what I found. So then we started, if they have those risk factors, I just gave the kids it's called infant probiotic by Clear Labs. And the incidence of sensitivities in them, it went down dramatically after doing that. So what happened, I was born in 1970. I went to college in, 88. So that's when the food started getting genetically modified. So now every mom doesn't have great flora because they've been eating GMO food. So that all is pesticide and all that's killed their good bacteria. So the amount of kids we're seeing now with food allergies and all that, really, it's pretty staggering how many kids, and it all has to do with your gut health. So it's very hard to just say we're going to eat that. So you have to have that conversion from day one. So we use a probiotic that's Bifido infantis strain. And at this conference, they talked about that too. The first 2 years, really, that's what you should be getting, because that's usually what you get from your mom. But if you combine that with breast milk that has human milk oligosaccharide, you prevent that leaky gut, which is causing a lot of the allergies and all that. So is it 100%? No, but you can decrease the incidence by doing a lot of these kind of things early on. So trying to get them to breastfeed, give them probiotic, give them a methylated vitamin, fish oil, and tummy time. Early on, those 5 things and just limiting iPads. Limit technology till their brain is developed, which is about, by 5 years old, I think at that point you can start it judiciously. But, trying to give a 6-month-old, an iPad is way too early. So, so I think those are things that you can do to prevent a lot of disease, just those basic things.
It is pretty cool how resilient the body is and how it can heal. If a parent came in with, all these issues had already developed, it's too late to prevent. What rate of success do kids have in getting back to being healthy? Or not back, but getting healthy for the first time, maybe.
Well, the gut, I find by 2.5, 3 is set. So whatever you are at that age, you're going to revert back to that. So it's a lot harder to fix it. Where early on, I think it's a lot easier to fix it. It's not you can't do it, but it's a lot harder to do that. So you want to do as much of this as little, as young as possible. So, but I think that immune system, we went to Dr. Hugh Sampson he's a pretty famous allergist out of Mount Sinai. And I remember going to one of his lectures, because before I got into development, I was very big into allergy. I'm like, what are all these kids getting allergy and asthma? So that was really what started me with a lot of this stuff. And he said at his lectures, if you have a family history of atopy, which means, the parents have allergies, eczema, asthma, that's called atopy, that's the triad, that if you have that family history, by what you recommend and when you feed the baby, you can decrease the expression of those genes by 50%. So to me, it's like, wow, as a pediatrician, what I'm recommended can change the outcome of this kid's genetics and their health. And so that was like pretty interesting. So if you start them with either breast milk or hypoallergenic formula, then you have 50% decrease of those genes expressing themselves. And I've taken that model for ADD, all these, so it's the same kind of thing. So we have to be very careful what we're feeding them, what we're doing the first 6 months, and you can change the outcome in a lot of these things. So that's why it's important to take a family history and then see if you can, you can change gene expression. And all that's epigenetics, and that goes back to the methylation. If you work on that and gut health early on, I think those are 2 things that we have to really focus as doctors. But not something we learned, the AEP is not teaching this stuff, unfortunately. And that's where there's a disconnect. And I think a lot of people are leaving or skeptical of mainstream medicine now that you have the internet and looking at alternative ways of doing things.
Seems like if it doesn't have an FDA-approved stamp of approval, then there's initial skepticism, even though these types of healthy living have history in thousands of years. That's how humans have been living and eating and interacting. But
yeah, everyone, this integrated conference, I went there all, these are the healthiest people I've ever seen in my life. Okay, so these people are living the life, they're healthy, they're all, it's great. So you listen to them, but it's all connected. So your muscles are connected to your gut, connected to your brain, and it's all one big interconnection. So if you want to be healthy, build your muscles, right? Social active creatures. We're out. My grandmother had guns because she would wash dishes, wash the everything by her hands, or the clothes and and all those kind of things. So there wasn't machines back then. So she had little guns, and they didn't have a lot of food, so they had less food back there. They were leaner people, much stronger. And the word that they used, which I think is one we have to look at, is resiliency. How do you become more resilient? And so that's what this guy David Perlmutter talks about. I don't know if you know David Perlmutter. He talks about. He wrote the book Grain Brain, and talks about he's a very smart guy. And they asked him. They had this panel of 4 integrated doctors who've been doing this for a long time. And they said, "Well, what is your health? Like, how do you define health? And is it your blood pressure? Is it your BMI? And his answer was, well, I look at resiliency. So are you physically, mentally, metabolically, and immune resilient? And so it means if you get sick, like did you get COVID and you're 30, did you go in the ICU or did you get through it? Are you, living on sugar right now and you are pre-diabetic and your metabolic system isn't working well? But they're all sort of interconnected, and we have to understand that what goes on in your muscles will affect your gut, and what goes on in your gut will affect your brain. And we're not so, broken up into compartments. And I think that's the integrated approach that we have to look at, so that the zinc and magnesium that you're taking affect everything, your whole body. It's not just your brain, it's your immune system, your muscles, all of these kind of things. So it's all interconnected. And I think that's how we have to look at things. But unfortunately, now we become compartmentalized. Medicine is becoming more and more specialized. Very few I would say that the higher students in medical school want to go, hey, I'm going to be a pediatrician or an internist. They want to be a dermatologist, a radiologist. They just, want to look at, or cardiologist. So we're just looking at the heart. We're just looking at the brain. We're not looking how it's all connected. And then you go into all these different doctors and they're writing you prescriptions. And now you get these, they mount up and no one's really communicating and putting it all together.
Well, and even then it's kind of myopic, because even if you specialize, if you're so focused on one thing that you're ignoring how interconnected it is, that doesn't seem the most effective or best practice either.
Yeah. I saw this week, this little 3-year-old girl came in and she had like black eyes and from punching her face, and she's diagnosed with autism. And it was one of the saddest things I've seen. And I don't mean to depress this right now, but she's been to some of the top hospitals in America and top functional medicine doctors. And when you see a child like that, it's very clear to me that she has serious GI issues that no one's diagnosed with her. And because she has, these delays, a lot of doctors have a tough time understanding that, and so we just gave her a methyl B12 shot and changed her diet. And within a week, she's feeling better. This is a girl who's been held by her parents for 3 years, and no one's looking at like how do you put this whole thing together, that her development and your gut and all this is sort of related. I don't know, it's just very sad that we're at this state where we can't really, with all the technology you have and all these things we're doing, that we're seeing kids like that. And it's more and more. And to me, some of it is just basic medicine, but the problem is, you are a problem solver. My dad was a problem solver. He just used his eye. My dad used his 5 senses. He would walk to the front. Okay, those 2 kids are really sick. Bring them back now. Now back then you listened to the parent, but then they had to be quiet. There was no back and forth. It wasn't like I was on Dr. Google and tell me about it. It was not. It was very patriarchal medicine back then. But he used his hands, his 5 senses, and he relied on that. Now, we've lost that. Everything's in the box. And, you look at your tummy hurts. Okay, we're going to give you, Miralax. That's it. So I can almost guarantee you when you go to GI, this is what they're going to do. There's no thinking out of the box anymore, or about what is the child eating? How often is, other things. They're not asking those kind of questions and seeing it's all related. I don't know. It's kind of sad. Yeah.
Well, the kid in me, when I walk down the grocery store aisle and I see there's now a birthday cake flavored Oreo or a Easter Oreo, and there's like 20 different flavors for what used to be one type of candy, and then the whole candy aisle is like that. The kid in me is like, dang, I wish this was here when I was a kid. But I think in every adult deep down, something's got to be saying, this is not how it should be. Like, we should not be specializing in junk food to this degree. Like, and I'm not perfect. I definitely get those birthday cake Oreos every now and then, but like, I also get, blueberries and raspberries and fruit and real food.
There's one Tom Brady, right? there's one, this is what I do. Good luck to me. Ronaldo, these guys.
Tom Brady for a day.
Can you do this? So, the discipline that they have. It's great. Look, some of it's human nature, right? That as humans, you don't know when you're going to eat again, so you're going to gorge yourself until,
I like the idea of resiliency though, because when I think of stepping away from pediatrics and I think of like elite athletes, I think of the people getting in the ice water baths and the people that are not eating, and every type of resiliency to me goes through some type of pain, because there's some type of not like bad pain.
That's the word, right? Grit. Pain.
Yes.
Kids don't have that anymore, right?
And because you get to that point of where I'm hungry and it's like, well, I have to eat. And it used to be like you could go 30 minutes or a few hours being hungry, or you could go a few minutes or hours being cold. Like now we live in this, the opposite of resilient, just comfort. Everything's comfort. And that's probably not.
Yeah, and you're hungry now. Okay, let me get my phone out and I'm going to just press Uber, and these guys are going to bring stuff into me,
The amount of dopamine has diminished the smallest amount. What's going on Instagram? Like I need to fill that immediately.
Yeah, but there was the woolly mammoth theory, right? So if you when you're hungry, you hunt, right? And then once your belly's full, you rest for a few days. Then then you go hunting again. But if our kids today are just always have full bellies, like my dad and my father-in-law came to America, they had no happy childhood memories. They left Greece, war. What do you do with your kids? Like not feed them and give them no shoes and make them walk outside barefoot? So how do you bring that tough love? But that motivates the human, to do those things. And they just came here for an opportunity, work hard. My parents both became doctors. My mom, for a woman back then and born in the 30s to go become a doctor, that was unheard of, but she was driven to do that. And, but that was your way out, so how do you motivate kids today, especially boys, and that's really what we're seeing now in my office. The girls, like, 3 or 4 girls say, I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be a doctor. They know I'm going to do this. They're very driven, understand. But I think the boys are a little bit lost, the messaging now. So how do you motivate them to be hungry? And sometimes they like taking shortcuts in life, and that definitely happened over COVID, where the boys are like, all right, they're just going to pass all of us. We're just going to play video games all day. So the learning loss for the boys was a lot higher, I believe,
I think
over that time,
The whole dopamine reward system in the brain is to reward and encourage good behavior. And when you get dopamine without having done any of that and it becomes too easy, then you stop becoming purpose-driven and focused on a goal or a task, or, why go to medical school or law school when I could feel the same just by playing video games?
Right.
So what do you do?
Can you get your boys, if you want them to be successful, they have to be not hooked on one of 3 things, okay, which is video games, gambling, and porn. Okay, those are the 3 things that if your kid can get through not be on those things, they can be successful. I think the average male in college is spending about 6 hours on their phone. When mommy and daddy are not there, like, get off your phone, those kind of things. So
the gambling one surprises me. I don't think of that for kids or young men.
We had
either.
Kids wrestle. We were watching the NCAA wrestling. My son's a wrestler. One of my kids who has a little bit more focusing issues, and the coach had to take their phones away because they're all gambling as the wrestling is going on, So, and I don't know if they're gambling on wrestling or whatever, but these are like 15-year-old kids, and they just have, they're all sitting there doing that. Again, the phone is just, I'm glad I did not have that so much as a kid, because we were outside riding our bikes, doing things much more independent. But we don't also afford that for our kids today. No one, like, when we were kids, we did this, but now who's letting their kids do some of these things?
I think as a parent, like the one thing that my kids definitely have, even, being ADHD, dyslexic, whatever, is an insatiable curiosity. So I try and foster and feed that into a more constructive route, and whatever that is. And we've gotten into, I joked about playing video games with feudal Japan and katanas, but we built a forge in the backyard, and like just playing with like melting knives and cutting stuff and doing some type of activity. And my other son, who's just wanting to throw the football, and I was like, anytime you want to go throw the football, I will drop what I'm doing. And we were out there. It's been a gorgeous spring, but I think there are definitely ways to fuel that curiosity, and all kids love playing.
Yeah, and I think they need to learn through play. I mean, I know where my kids went to school, that was how they taught them early on. They loved going to school. So it wasn't this like, okay, sit in a chair all day kind of thing. And the education system, again, has, have to go back to, like in Finland, they learn for like 20, 30 minutes, and then they do calisthenics for 10 minutes. So there's constant movement built in. So I think that's very, very important to understand child development. Problem is, I think people coming up with the curriculums don't understand child development. They are like, professor types, I think, out of, very elite institutions, and they're trying to, change how they're teaching the kids. And it worked well for many, many years. And I'm not sure what the goal is, because a lot of the kids can't do the basic math. They don't want to read anymore. And I think once, especially boys, get like video games, trying to get them to read after that is very, very difficult. But I think you have to find the material, that they like to read, like adventure books, comic books. Those are the kind of things we're reading. And some of the stuff they're picking now, the boys like, I don't really want to read this stuff. I'm not really into that stuff. So they're not really into the emotions and feelings books so much,
My oldest, who is dyslexic, so he has that additional, it's hard to get into reading when it's such a challenge to read efficiently. Playing another video game, Black Myth Wukong, which is based off of the Chinese myth of the journey into the West. Like, I'll read that book. Here, go to the bookstore, get the book, and you find what they are interested in, and they'll read.
Right. But I do think a lot of the boys, the way the shift in education in this country is tuning them out. They don't like the books they're choosing, and I think those are the kind of books that I read, or even the shows we watched. It was culturally very different back then. It was about adventures and, frontiersmen and all these kind of things. And a lot of them had morals and values, and I think that was very, very important to talk about virtues and high character. And I think we've gotten away from that in this country a little bit. And we need to go back to some of those fundamentals. What made this country great? Why did, our ancestors come on a boat here for what, those kind of things. And I don't know, hopefully there's a shift back, and a lot of that starts at home, what you're teaching your kids.
And it doesn't, whatever the school administration, whatever the schools are doing is going to be that. And that's something I can't really do. But as a parent, I have a lot of control over what they do at home, and I can foster that, the activity level, even just, I've sat down with my daughter and kind of walked through some homework she was struggling with, but like there's a participation level in their education. And last week was their spring break, and we did a drive up to Washington, D.C., and I was a little bit concerned about how little they knew of. And that's also on me, like I don't outsource all their education to the schools, but they got really fascinated with, the history of the nation, and, Gettysburg is only an hour and a half drive from here. Let's go, what happened here? And it was good to get them kind of tied back into, I don't know, I took AP history, and I don't know.
We read the Patriots Almanac every day, from William Bennett. I recommend that book. It tells you every day what happened in American history. And in the office now, we have a thing called the Book of Virtues. So every month we have a virtue of the month. And kids are like, what is that? Like, what's these kids like in high school? And I can't tell you. So this month it's faith. What is that? What is, 1 month was compassion or courage. So understand those words. It's been focusing too much on our emotions and feelings. It's about how do you deal with those things, but get on with it to become resilient. And if we're just sad and mad all day, who's going to be resilient? And I think that's very, very important, how to get grit and get the kids working hard again. But I don't know. Hopefully, there'll be a swing back into that mentality a little bit. But so how old are your kids now? How old are you?
So my oldest is 18. He is graduating in a month. And then my daughter is 17. And then my youngest son is 11. So there's
middle school.
Yeah,
So
and
going to college or a trade, or have you thought about that?
he would love to be a pilot. And so we're looking at flight lessons, and there's a university he's interested in that does a lot of like aviation mechanics, because I don't think he knows whether he wants to like get his hands dirty and like just like planes and fixing them or flying them. But I also like changed my mind a million times. Like I wanted to be an anesthesiologist when I was in high school, and then I wanted to be a cardiologist, and then I wanted to be an aerospace engineer, and then I wanted to be an attorney, and now I'm like, take your time, figure it out. Like, I almost think it's healthy to some extent, with college being as expensive as it is, like work for a little bit, like see what you really want to do before you invest a lot of money into college. But
yeah, I think kids today sometimes like look at what makes a lot of money online. They've never done it before. Because I've one of my patients is like a dean at Columbia Dental School, and it's like a high percentage of the kids when they're done, they're like, oh, I got to put my hands in kids' mouths. So they end up becoming lawyers or something after 8 years of undergrad, 8 years of dental school, 4 years dental school. So 8 years of total schooling. How much money that costs is ridiculous. And then you want to do something different. So
I remember being in college looking at dental school, and at the time it seemed like they made a great amount of money. A lot of them had practices where it was like Monday through Thursday. And I was like, I can't work in someone's mouth. That has I could never, ever do that. I could.
But you figured that out early, not after.
Yeah.
Years.
No, and that's why I didn't go down that route. I loved the idea of being like a cardiothoracic surgeon and like cutting someone up and fixing it. Like, but teeth, I don't know. They're two different things. My youngest, it's just a crazy world. He is enamored with Mr. Beast and being a YouTuber and how much money you can make doing that. And I'm astonished that is a thing, and you can make so much money making content videos, playing video games. I mean, that's nuts.
Yeah, but I think about 0.5% of people make money doing that.
Oh, right. But
99.5 don't.
I know.
But, maybe that's changing. I don't know. But the ones who do make money make a lot of money.
I grew up careful about wanting to be a professional football player, professional basketball player. It's very hard to make a career out of that. And now it's like being a YouTuber. I mean, honestly, a lot of them are really fun. But it's just a very different time.
Well, life takes you down a road, right? So again, I left. I went to Connecticut for 1 year just to replace Dr. O'Hara, who eventually trained me at that conference. So you see, never met her until I went, until I sent her those patients. And, so even like being here today, this is the next step in a journey, and where I was in high school and, told my parents I was going to be a lawyer because they're both doctors. I think I just wanted to piss them off. Anyway. But then I went to college, and those are the classes I was better at. I liked biology better. And you just went down that road, and then, then you started seeing things differently. And I don't know, you just see things a certain way, and then it is very clear to me. And like going to that integrative conference was just like amazing. And just learning, those, some basic things. And that medicine was just fascinating. And you just take that and make it a better experience for your patients and for your own health and for your, and it's finding that balance. I think that's important.
I had mentioned earlier that the last time I spoke or that we talked was at the Healthy Path Foundation.
Our healthy fall festival. That's what we had.
Yeah. Well,
high school kids teaching little kids about those 10 habits. But what's helped, I would tell you that we've done the last 3 or 4 years, we have like sponsors, like adult sponsors. We put them with the high school kids. And it's been amazing because they mentor. So the older generation is mentoring the high school kids. Then the high school kids are teaching the little kids. And that's what's missing. Before we kept it separated, I think we had a lot more mentoring, the neighbors, the villagers. My neighbor had no problem yelling at me, telling me, teaching me something. Now it's like very disconnected. And I don't think you're going to learn life.
Parents sometimes don't let the neighbors help.
Yes.
Like don't.
Or they're videotaping you. It's like, so it's just very disconnected. And but look, I learned values and morals just watching TV shows back then. The Brady Bunch taught us a lot of, there's always a value at the end of some of the shows we watched. And now a lot of kids are watching, I don't know, some kids head popping out of a toilet, and that's the thing on YouTube that they're watching. And what are you learning from that exactly? Other than dopamine hits, what is that actually doing for your betterment of your brain?
Yeah.
So.
Well, it seemed to me the fact that you're able to attract so many sponsors and people to participate, that there is a professional network as well as not just the community network and family network that you are involved in, but you have a good professional network of, I guess, like-minded people.
Well, I don't have all the answers. That's the first conference was run. This is Nancy's slide. Run from people who tell you they know all the answers. Okay, I don't have all the answers. See, you have a great product,
It fills a niche. It's not the only thing for everyone.
No, does it help everybody? No, but I don't know. I would say probably like at least 40-50% of kids, when they go on that, especially ADD kids, some parents call me up like, wow, that was like such a big, my office manager's daughter, and she was a very bright girl. She's like, oh my God, her focus has been, and she was like a great student before that. But again, it's just amazing, the difference on that.
It's a low bar when we're all so malnourished.
Well, I take it every day. I feel it's not just for kids. I would just tell you.
No.
But it because I have two I have two A copies of MTHFR, so you can see some health struggles you have. And if I wish I knew this years ago, again, I wish I knew this stuff 20 years ago for my patients before. But again, you live, you learn, and you go on. And I'm sure if we have this conversation 5 years from now, we'll be doing different things. But now I have it. So you don't go to Dr. Malillo with your child's brain imbalance. I have them go to tummy time class. So she's an OT who sees 5-year-olds who can't hold a pencil because they have those reflexes that never went away. So she does tummy time classes for babies to make sure they can roll and crawl. And that's a huge part of the practice. You have, and I work with a lot of PTs and chiropractors because alignment is super important. The body will heal itself if it's aligned. So I think just thinking we're just going to give medication to everybody is kind of arrogant. We think that's going to fix everything. And I'm not anti-medication, but I guess if you have ADD, here's the 7 things we're going to do first. We're going to get some sleep. We're going to shut the machines off at night. We're going to limit the machines for a couple hours. We're going to cut back the sugar. Then we start, concentrate. We go on, methylated B vitamins, minerals. So we start with those things first, and then we go from there. And I would say a large percentage of them don't end up on medicine, or they need a lot less medicine. I'm not saying, some kids don't need it, but it shouldn't be, to me, the first thing you put a 4-year-old on, right away. I think you have to give them a little bit of time to see if they can develop. But the problem is in the modern schooling right now, some of these kids to sit down all day, it's very hard, to be in that system.
And it's not the system that humans have traditionally been in. I mean, this is relatively, in the context of civilization, relatively recent, just sitting at a desk for long periods of time and no movement. But
yeah, we did this company called Genomind. I don't know if you've done that. Yeah. So I had this, she's a psychiatrist. So she reads the test with me. She could tell me what the kid's behavior is just looking at the gene testing. Oh, this kid's like, he's like a warrior kid. This other one, no, this kid will, poop his pants on the front line. He's got to be in the back, peeling potatoes. Like you can tell their temperament, and society needs everybody, right? You need the kid at the wall. So ADD kids to me are the kid on the top of the wall. who's they're looking for the invaders, right? You need to be looking, and that's a skill set. But now you're telling them that's bad. Like, sit in your chair. What are you doing? And they have really active brains. They're really smart. These are creative people. So once they get out of school and get a job, they're fine, but the schooling system, but when you're telling them you're dumb, you can't sit down, you're bad, and some of them are brilliant, but we're creative. So we have to bring back some of that creativity. And just like I do sort of, individualistic medicine, I think you have to look at education too and see what's the right fit for your kid and doing all that. So that's my next thing we're looking at, is opening a school in Staten Island that with somebody who left the DOE, just like I left basic, regular medicine, to say, because both of them are broken, to do things that are a little bit different. She teaches everybody Orton Gillingham.
Oh, okay.
Everybody, because everyone needs to learn that way of reading, because you're not just doing sight words, which is leading to a lot of dyslexia and using the wrong part of your brain. So we learn phonics based, and that's really so how we change that in education. Now, a lot of kids can't read because of how we're teaching them.
Yeah.
And if you bring in some of the things that I do, and every kid's going to get brain balance at 5 years old to make sure that they don't have integrated reflexes.
So tell me about the school in Staten Island. This is something
it's not built yet. This is in our minds. We're about to start that.
Okay.
So
so it's still in the ideation phase.
No, we've had like approvals and all that, but our goal is in a year and a half. That's what we're going to be doing. So we have to take back, education, medicine, and say, this isn't working for our kids. It's broken systems, and we either change it, or it's just not working. Something has to change.
No, I totally agree. I would love to come back after this gets going and talk to you again.
Yeah, and you can give everybody there just action. Action show would be great. Just open your mouths.
Well, the thing is, I really think that you hit the nail on the head. It's not just medicine. It's not just health. It's education.
How to mess up children.
And I haven't heard anyone talking about this. I haven't heard anyone talking about changing education this way.
I spend more time talking about education than I talk about medicine, because I'm Greek, so we invented all this stuff. So I think education is important. We can argue this: should your kid get educated? But
that's got to be one of the hot takes out of this. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, like I had uncles. They ran restaurants, but they were brilliant. They could quote philosophers and know all that.
Yeah,
and we growing up, especially my dad being a physician, it was constant Greek philosophy. The big thing is bon metron ariston. All in moderation is excellent. So you have to be well-rounded. And when I went to school, it was, I went to a prep school around here. Everything was well-rounded. You played 3 sports. You had to do well in school. We had to do poetry. We built things. We built swords and shields, and we did all sorts of things. So we had to do a lot of that. Now it's like, okay, you're going to play sports. You're going to do this. It's very segregated. We're not well-rounded. And I think the human needs to be well-rounded. Mentally, physically, and spiritually. I think there's a disconnect between all that, and the technology, we're just raising, narcissistic psychopath kids who just want to look at themselves all day and feeding their dopamine fixes. It's really sad. Now, where that come from, which you can go down a million rabbit holes how that's happened, but we have to make changes at this point. Otherwise, I don't know how we're going to go forward as a society.
Well, that to me really hit hard, only because I watched Braveheart with my son last week, the 18-year-old. Yeah. I don't know if that makes me a good parent or bad parent to watch Braveheart at that age, but
we've seen Braveheart. How many times have we seen Braveheart? We've seen a lot.
When William Wallace is first educated, and his uncle takes him to Rome, and he learns Latin, and then he gets pulled in front of the nobles, and they're talking behind his back in Latin. He's like, yeah, I understand you. It is, he was, and all he wanted to do was live and farm, but he was able to be a warrior because he was educated, and he was well balanced in, he was educated, family man, warrior, and it's an awesome movie.
Yeah. And sometimes just because you're a physician doesn't mean you're well educated. Greek, there's a word called morphosis, which is just being well-rounded and understanding that. Just because you know a lot about one thing doesn't mean you're, sometimes doctors are the least what we can talk about is medicine, not talking about other things. So I think that's the word you have to be, is just, be generally, interested about learning And I think they've just destroyed that,
Well,
with just how they're teaching right now and all that curiosity and all that sort of been taken out. So I think that's where we're going to be focused on. So kids are going to finish with skills and trades and be able to do those things, how to critically think. I think that's, and when she says, I want these kids to have a pragmatic education. So your kid can't be manipulated so they can actually think. I think the goal right now is to be manipulated so you can be controlled. And, that's unfortunately the cynical view of things, but I think that's where we're going. And I see young kids coming out of school, and that's what I try to get to. You're going to come to my office. They follow me. Well, let's think today. I don't want to tell you everything. That's the box. And I think the kids don't know how to think out of the box because the fringe is where all the new innovation is coming from. But if the science is concluded, don't question anything, right? In the ancient Greeks, what's the first rule is you always question your teachers. But if we can't question now, that's it. We're going to implode as a society if there's no questioning.
That's almost one of the things that gives me hope about my kids is that, like, they've got the critical thinking skills. Like, they have no problem questioning me. And I never feel like I hated as a kid the because I told you so answer. So I've with some of them have gone to ridiculous levels of why, until they're like, oh, okay, I understand. I get that. And I think if you can get your kid critical thinking skills, they have a significant competitive advantage out there because it is lacking.
Right. Yeah. So, but you have to get off the phone, right? So if you go back their technology a little bit, that'll make them successful. It used to be just to outwork everybody. But now if you can be less distracted and work hard and be smarter about it, I think, they'll be successful doing that. But that starts at home. I think sometimes we do a little too much for the kids, and and I think we have to let them fail sometimes. And I think as parents, you don't always want to do that. You always want to throw life preservers to them.
Yeah, it's hard, but you do for them to be resilient. They have to experience that pain, and you help them through it. But if they don't become resilient, you can't become resilient for them.
Yeah, well, my kids play a lot of sports, so it's so there's one coach is saying, "Well, you guys are making too many, sheep right now. You're sending me sheep or lambs. I need wolves, so you need hungry kids to go out there."
What sports?
But, they play a lot of soccer. So
okay,
yeah. So my youngest is going to be playing. She's a goalkeeper. She's going to be playing down at Washington and Lee down in Virginia. So
nice.
She's the one that's going to be pre-med. So, but yeah, she's successful because she just works hard, So it's not, sometimes you want to just, it's the kids who, you want them to do things. And I think if they're self-motivated, and that's the challenge right now, I think is, like my parents left poverty because they were self-motivated. They didn't have to become doctors. They just wanted to. And I think that's something that when you're poor and that's your way out of things, you see, that was their motivation, but it's a lot harder to do that now. And I think the girls are a little bit more self-motivated because going back, I guess you understand that part of it. It's how do you get these boys to do things as much,
Well, I think being a goalie is an interesting position because there's a lot of leadership and out-of-the-box thinking. You have to direct the defense and you have to tell people where to go. You're the one with like the view of the field.
She used to, because she used to play with her brother's team because they're twins. I have two sets of twins. So and she would play with his team, and she'd be bossing these boys around. And the first time, these boys like my mother doesn't talk to me. Like they almost like quit on her. She's like, I don't care. You're gonna do the job. Like she has no problems doing that. And
where'd she get that from?
So that's her mother. Yeah, that side of the family.
So she's a great goalie because of her mother.
Yeah, I know. Well, my parents are both doctors. My father, they're very hardworking people. Came here, he was almost a lawyer. It could have been part of the Coast Guard there in Greece, but came here for a better life. He was painting houses. Next thing you know, they opened up pizzerias in Boston. She was running a pizzeria at 12 years old, and that's just it. You work for the family business. I don't care if all the other kids are playing at the football game on Friday. You're here, that's what we do in the family.
Making pizza is not a bad gig. If that were my fate, I wouldn't complain.
No, they did very well. They worked hard, had a great living, and able to send their kids to college and do all that. And, so, but that's the American dream. You came here, you worked hard. So how do you pass that on, right, with each generation to do that? And that's where we're at now. So, yeah, no, I have great kids, but they're 4 kids that are very, very different. They all have their skill set and talents, and how do you water that and not, even though they all came out of my wife, they're all very different.
2 sets of twins. That sounds so like there's so much scientific experimentation that could be going along.
Oh, there's a lot of science.
You have, are they identical twins?
No.
Oh, okay.
So, no. So
a little bit less
boy, girl,
then.
yeah. So,
they're.
Yeah. But yeah, they're great kids though. So, yeah, John's over here with me today. So he's been helping out. He does a lot of, my social media. He's, helps out with like the real estate and as we change the business. So, he went to Davidson, a really good college down in North Carolina. That was after Steph Curry graduated, so he missed out on that. But he had 2 years of COVID, my older two, and that was, I think, tough going to college, and the experience wasn't
definitely
quite the same for them. But
that's some expensive tuition.
Yeah, and not getting your exact, the education you thought you were going to be getting, and all the activities and everything that they were doing before. So but they're all, they all find their way, and they all have different, skills. And my John's sibling Stella, she's going to be a teacher, so she's going back for that, and she's, they all have their strengths, their weaknesses, and but they're all amazing kids in their own way.
It's fun how different they. At least my kids are all extremely different. It's like
you do the genomine, you'll see the differences, these little differences in those things, and they can tell you what their personalities are going to be.
Well,
and all that.
That is, I think I will do that because I'm very curious. And even though they're as different as they are, there are certain aspects, physical, social, mental, that you can attribute to. Oh, that's mom, that's dad, that's grandpa, that's there. You can see where there is kind of, it's all a connected family.
Yeah, but I could see John and Chrissy, the 2 twins that were a pound bigger, they got more nutrition. So physically they were like stronger kids. And because they moved again, go back, they were moving in the moon war. So I can go back and you relive your own life and your kid's life and all these things that, if you went back 20 something years ago, you'd do things a lot differently. But you can see like how that affected. So them being a pound different, getting more blood flow, moving more because they have more space, then they're able to do more as babies, as kids, and all of that. So I think that we have to go back to the beginning and be studying more of that stuff. So I think, again, going back to what Dr. Kofinas is doing in the working womb and what's going on there, that's where you have to focus. But that's all about prevention. And part of why I left the hospital system, it's because when they're like, well, you don't send us patients. I go, well, I keep people out of the hospital, and I'm like, well, like, what do you guys do here for prevention? Like, what's, like, oh, they think about it like, oh, we have the psych ward here. We're preventing suicides. I'm like, okay. So it's all about disease. That's what makes money.
That's really sad.
So, yeah, and they're not reimbursing you more because you had kids who have better outcome. I'm outcome-based pediatrics, education being that's what we're going to do. School's going to be about outcome, that your kids are going to be functional and they're not just going to go on the conveyor belt, be done, and go like. It's like what happens to the kids at the end of the day. And I think that's really what we look at. And I follow the kids' development. We want to make sure they're doing well. If they're not, then you got to send them to chiropractor, PT, OT, triaxin, all these kind of things. So you want to have the best outcomes in the kids, not just, you're growing fine, and that's it. You have to look at the outcome, but we're not judged on that.
Yeah.
We're judged on, do you keep them out of the hospital? Do you keep them out of urgent care? There's certain aspects that have nothing really to do with your health. And that's how I think physicians should be rewarded based on how healthy the kids are, not necessarily, or how resilient, I guess, but we don't have measures for that in medicine.
Yeah, I am grateful that you have a practice that you do the way that you have it set up. It seems like the holistic community approach is one that's ultimately leads to greater health for the individual and the family, and why we've deviated from that is another story.
Yeah, well, I think you have to, be careful what you say and who you say and who you who you offend. But again, I just focus on, let's have good outcomes. What can we do to improve things, and partner up with good people, like your company. And I'm not just saying that because you're here. I think it's a great product, and it makes sense. And it's what I tell parents: so your baby's brain is made out of fat. We need to get cholesterol, and we have to get omega-3 in early on. And that conference, and I think it's not just for the kids, the amount of dementia we're seeing now and all these things in older people. And why is that? Because they're going on things that are lowering the fats in their brains, and they're eating like less fat diets. So if you're lowering your fat and you're not eating the fat, because there's only two things, well, there's no essential carbohydrates, right? There's essential fatty acids and essential amino acids. And there's essential minerals and vitamins, right? So, and those are things that your product has a bunch of those things in it. And the American diet is lacking a lot of those things. So it makes sense that we would give those. It'd be great if everybody ate those, but I think some of those things, they're not getting into the brain unless you're eating them when you're pregnant, right? So that's the key, or the developing baby. So starting that early is very, very important.
Most of the DHA in all of us comes during the pregnancy and first 2 years of being alive. That is the critical time of getting omega-3 fatty acids, especially DHA. And I kind of, when comparing kids, when my youngest was born and for his first year alive, I was working on a patent portfolio for omega-3 fatty acids from enriched eggs. So it was DHA from eggs. And that's just what I happened to be working on. So I was like, I found a brand of eggs at the grocery store that had 660 milligrams of omega-3 fatty acids. I would take them home, hard boil them, separate the whites, use them for something else. But I had all these like little egg yolk balls. And then when threw them in the freezer until I had enough, put them in the food dehydrator, and then the blender. So I had this like golden powder that would put in Bradley's formula or in muffin mixes. I added it to everything. So he had his omega-3s and his DHA.
She only did this for one of the children.
Yeah. And he is the least ADHD of all of us. And those types of things make a difference.
He's your last one.
Yeah.
Because usually, if you don't change, because as we get older as parents, the kids have more and more issues as they get. So we see the first child may have ADD. If parents don't change, then the next child has autism, then the next one may have a club foot, a family like that. Where you have the first one has ADD, mom's like, okay, let's get healthier, change our diets, and each child gets better and better after. So you can control the aging process. We go back to that by what you're eating and all those kind of things. So yes, for the last one to have the least tells me that, especially if he's a male species, but that's what Dr. Kofinas, go back to him. Mike, they all have to eat eggs. Choline, you need the choline. So he just
you do, and it's so devastating that for decades it was like, be careful about eating eggs because of cholesterol.
And which part of eggs do you not eat, right? Yeah. Just eat the egg whites, right? Don't eat the yolk. So.
And the yolk is where all the nutrients are.
That's right.
The omega-3s, the choline, a lot of folate. There's a lot of nutrients in yolks.
Well, the egg's a perfect food, right? Someone can grow from that. So if you have that, really, that's I think it was, I don't know if it was a Harvard kid, medical student. Did you hear that? So he ate 600 eggs or something. That's all he ate for a month, and his cholesterol went down. So everything you're learning is almost like what they're teaching you is almost like backwards of what's really going on, and you have to then again, the Greek can use like questioning, like what is really going on. And you have to like believe your eyes and what you're seeing, and that's really what I don't understand. It's like, are we all not seeing the same thing here? Are we not all seeing the kids having all these issues, and we're just going to keep doing the same plan here? Can we maybe just relook at things a little bit?
And the human body and all of the biological systems are just so much more complex than what goes in goes out. Whether if I want less fat, I'll eat more sugar. It's way more complicated than that.
Sure.
Eating all the sugar is just going to cause insulin spikes, cause your body to start storing fat, because why burn fat when you have all this sugar in your blood now? So we're going to start storing fat and accumulating fat. It's way more complicated.
No, but you can give a GLP and it'll be fine. We can just hack life. That's what it is, right? So,
well, thank goodness for all the medications then.
Yeah. So, yeah, but it's interesting how the muscles are all connected. And there was this JJ Virgin was there, and she did this show like The Biggest Loser, and she's like I don't know, she's in her 60s, but she's like got guns, and she just talks about like muscle eats glucose. So the bigger your muscles are, the more glucose. I think she has a trademark called Muscle Spanx. She's trademarked that term. So, if you just build your muscles, and after your 30s, you just break down your muscles. So you're losing 1% of your muscle mass every year. So you have to eat lots of protein. Got to eat, those essential fatty acids for your brain. Otherwise, you're just living on sugar. You're breaking your muscles. You're breaking your brain down. And do we have a dementia problem? Do we have, people who are weaker falling down? Yeah, those are the things we're seeing. So, but again, we have maybe a half an hour of nutrition in medical school, in residency.
Really?
It's just not part. It's just not part of your, it's not part of our it's our part of our education. So
that's been the toughest part for us, because in doing that, excuse me, in doing that patent portfolio, I learned that omega-3s in the phospholipid form have the greatest uptake to the brain. And conveying that message, because people hear omega-3s are good, so fish oil is good, but there are different...
It wasn't until it became a medicine.
Really?
Yeah, and for heart disease. Before that, you were a quack if you gave omega-3.
Okay, yeah.
And it became a medicine because, right, they patented it and it became a drug. Then it's okay.
But it stuck. Fair enough.
Yeah.
The idea stuck. And so people, I think, generally hear fish oil is good for overall health, overall brain health. But fish oil comes in free fatty acid form, triglyceride form, if other forms are in phospholipid form. And the study that really kind of got my attention showed that omega-3s in triglyceride form do end up in the omega-3s end up in adipose tissue, muscle tissue, and heart tissue, and only a small amount go to the brain.
Right.
So, we were focused for mental health. Overall health is obviously important too, but if you're taking omega-3s for mental health, you got to take the right form. And that's a hard message to convey to a consumer.
You have to understand that. And that's why I said, well, no, you eat both.
But it makes sense.
One's for your heart, one's for your brain. You got to take both of them.
It does make sense that in medical school, there's only half-hour nutrition, because it's like been pounding my hands. Like, there's a difference. And one of the things that we did with the first patent portfolio company, we did this really cheap animation on YouTube. It's dirt cheap. But it had pictures of the different forms. And so it was like, you could see this is called DHA, but it looks different from this one and this one. And you're like, this is the one that goes to the brain. And it's like, oh, well, then I want that one. I'm like, well, that's not in fish oil. So don't get that one. It's really easy when you can actually see these microscopic molecules are different things. And I like that you were trained in, I think, Nancy O'Hare?
Yeah, she was like a Dan Docker. Now they call it MAPS now. They have a lot of different names for it. But yeah, because it became personal for them, because, back then it was like, okay, your kid's autistic, you got to put him in an institution.
Yeah.
Or, because they used to blame the moms years ago, called it refrigerator mom theory. And then a nurse, I think if you go back where it all started, there's a nurse maybe in Canada who put a schizophrenic person on B6 vitamin, and then that helped them. And then it started like, okay, let's look at vitamins. And it became out of this, like, I need to heal my kid. And I'm not just going to blame, my wife for putting him in an institution, because it's kind of sad that the early days of that. And then it grew from there. And then you start looking at the gut and the brain and B12 and, MTHFR. So I heard MTHFR in my office because this Dr. Kofinas was getting them pregnant. And then I went to that conference and they said, oh, MTHFR was all over that. And I'm like, okay. So then you start connecting the dots. And that's what it is. You just got to, connect dots and problem solve and do that. But if you're waiting, and look, and this is a lot of physicians that know, until they're told that this is the standard of care, they're not willing to change what we're doing. And I get, look, everyone's got licenses and they're, afraid, but I don't know. It's just, if you could help somebody and the parent tells you this helps my kid, why are you not willing to do that? And I don't know. The tree's over here, the limb's there. I'm way out on the limb, way very far out.
Part of me wants to cut and edit this question out because I don't know that you want this in part of the podcast. But I'm curious, just personally, what part of like malpractice plays a role into I don't want to do anything outside the box? Is that a concern for a lot of doctors?
Well, the C-section rate in New York is high. Why? I have two sets of twins. They're born vaginally because it was Connecticut and Long Island. In New York City, you would have been sectioned automatically because of malpractice. Parents don't want to go, if you question the doctor now about whatever vaccines or whatever, they'll throw you out of the practice if you don't do what I tell you, to do. So I think that does play a big role in that, and people don't really want to cover their ass and they want to do what's best. But at the end of the day, you have to answer to a higher authority. Yeah. And our first thing, Hippocrates was do no harm, and what's best for that patient. And but you got to think out of the box. The problem is the younger kids are not. It's just box medicine. And then you see the people like PAs or MPs, or they're just being trained to follow a certain, okay, you have a UTI, this is what we're going to give, and you're going backwards. You're not thinking first and then figuring it out. You just, here's the answer and I'm just going to do this and that's it.
A lot of what you've described. So my grandfather was a doctor and he was a family practitioner. And I remember his name was Maitland Spencer, but everyone just called him Doc Spencer. And it was like, that was the family community. You go see Doc Spencer. And I think there's something missing to the practice of medicine when the culture of community is kind of taken out. I've really enjoyed hearing that still exists in some places.
Yeah, well, right. But so when I went to Albany Med, they started systems approach. And I was like, wow, I thought that was great. Where like when you do the heart, you just study the heart and the physiology, anatomy, everything in the heart. So you could see it going down more that way. And I thought that was great that you learned all that at once. But you're not looking at putting it all together. And at this conference, they just had a big map of like everything. And this is connected with that. It's connected with this. It's all sort of related. And then the family doctor used to do all that. And my dad did a lot more of those kind of things. He was running premature babies and doing all these things. And that we have specialists for everything now, where he was the specialist for most of those things. So you're not referring out to a lot of other people. You had to be a generalist, really. And that's gone now. And I think they do that on purpose, right? So, you're going, this guy, he's just giving you these meds, but who's putting it all together? And these parents, and these kids, I see as much with the kids, but the adults, they're on like a million medications, and like, well, who's checking side effects and all of those things, and are they all working together? So,
is this conference still run annually, or?
Not so much. I mean, I went to that years ago. I just went to the integrated health conference, which is pretty. Yeah, that was pretty cool. Integrated Health Symposium was in New York, and and there was a few pediatricians. There's one center down in North Carolina where they have 17 integrated doctors, and they're part of the government, which is great. And so we're here in New York, it's not so much. You're just doing this more on your own, but you're trying to bring it to people, make it, because you have to spend a lot more time, and they don't value our time as pediatricians. It's because it takes a lot of time to do this kind of medicine. Yeah. And even a lot of the blood tests you're doing, they're considering that experimental. So I can give any medication I want, no problem. But when I'm doing, like I'm checking their iron or their folate levels, it's experimental. MTHFR, a lot of people don't even believe in that because it's so popular. They think it's, it's like, well, everybody has that. It mustn't mean anything. So I have 2 copies. Trust me, it means a lot. And if you don't manage that, it's part of the main thing that I deal with, and really
again,
makes a
like
big difference.
In my Forrest Gump career, not only did I work on the thyroid folate product, but when I was in-house counsel for a generic pharmaceutical company, we were making a generic form of a medical food called Deplin for depression, and so but
that's methyl. That's
L-methylfolate.
L-methylfolate, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the prescription form of it.
Yeah, and I deposed the expert on depression and L-methylfolate, so I keep bumping into L-methylfolate. So to hear people saying that, like, they doubt that makes... Folate is one of the most important nutrients that,
Sure.
like, every pregnant person knows you have to take folate if you're pregnant. It forms the neurotube. So if you're not getting folate, or if you're not getting the folate that works in the brain, that's a made up thing. Like, I don't.
Right, but going back to what those guys talked about, and if you're getting synthetic folate, it's building up.
Oh yeah.
You can't use it. Then you're making auto antibodies. That may be in the children you're talking about before. So that's where you got to take the leucovorin or the high doses of that. Right, but so that genome lady, everyone needs two things. They need a mood stabilizer, which is a drop of lithium, which is a mineral, and methylfolate. And a lot of the psych meds that they're using, they're just reacting to them. And by going on those two things, you can be, but again, they're both kind of cheap compared to the medications that you can go on. And it's things that should be, again, one's a mineral, one's a salt, and one's a folate. It's a vitamin. So that's what our bodies are missing, but yet then we're just going to, so instead of trying those things first, we're going right to medications that have a lot of side effects and other issues.
The folic acid it's not a natural molecule. It's an oxidized form of folate that can sit on the shelf for a good amount of time, or that you can blend in with a cereal. But I've talked to a lot of people who, I've seen studies showing that folic acid, unmetabolized folic acid, actually causes inflammation. So some people who are not gluten intolerant, if they stop taking the fortified foods and cereals, they actually do really well, as if they were, had celiac disease and reacting to gluten, but they're just taking the folic acid out. Or people will say that, they have issues when they eat bread in the United States, but they go to France and they don't fortify their foods there, and they have no issue eating bread.
Sure. Yeah, that's so the Amish guys I told you before they came, and the other people that came were the sourdough people. So they're
San Francisco.
So they have lactobacillus, and it gets a different grain that they use, so you don't get those glycemic spikes. So again, food is medicine there, because you're getting less sugar spikes, and you're getting lactobacillus probiotic. Where in conventional bread around here, you're getting yeast, you're getting 7 times the amount of gluten, and you're getting glyphosate. Fantastic combination that really is great for your gut. And years of that, then when you have a baby, you're passing that dysbiosis or abnormal microbiome to your babies, and then that's where we're seeing more and more allergies and all these things that we're seeing. So we really need to get the mom's gut better, feed the mom more eggs during, so they need more fat, right? The more of that omegas during the pregnancy. So you guys are going to launch then for the moms. That's awesome. So.
Yeah, it's sometime this year. Juggling a lot of things right now, but there's a need. There hasn't been like there are over-the-counter prenatals, there's prescription prenatals, but none of them have really focused in on all three of these ingredients with premium ingredients. And I come from a background of the prescription prenatals, patented ingredients, but it's got a patented iron, or it's got a really bioavailable folate, but not all of them.
Right.
So yeah, we should have an eccentrate prenatal sometime this year.
Yeah, but I think right now they're looking at the health of the country, and I think that is, you want to fix it. It's prevention's a lot easier, right, than the treatment. When you have when your immune system starts attacking you, or you have all these issues, it's a lot harder to undo those things. So that's why I've learned from these kids at my center, where I work with kids with autism and other things, but I learn from there, and then I bring it to the office and say, okay, how do we prevent it in the little ones? And it's amazing the difference. And one thing I learned at that conference years ago, so this guy, he's doctor there, and he's like, okay, just when we're all the doctors in the room, he's like, oh, look at you drinking Dunkin' Donuts styrofoam. That's good for you. And, oh, we're drinking an aluminum can over there. And so he just ripped us all about environmental medicine. These are things, again, we're not learning any of that. And he's like, well, if you've been practicing the last 10 years, and this was 17 years ago, you haven't seen a normal kid in 10 years. And now when you see kids who the moms are super healthy, because when I first started doing this in my foundation, back then the audience of my whole gala, we did these fundraisers, all parents who had their first kid was autistic. And then that woke them up. Now you have parents who are seeing the older generation going, okay, I want to have a healthy kid. And they're, after COVID, questioning everything. And it's amazing when they get super healthy, right, and eat the right things and eat those eggs and all those things while they're pregnant, how amazing these babies are coming out now. And those are things you haven't really seen. You're like, wow. When you see a 1-year-old who's running and talking, you're like, okay, this is a little different. And you realize it's affected all of us. You talk to the teachers like, oh my God, yeah, these kids, 10 years ago, the worst kids then would be the best kids right now as far as their functionality. And so we're at a critical point in this country where we need to make some big change. So that's part of me getting out of the office, trying to get out of my comfort zone, change my practice to do this, because I think, we have to do this for our grandkids and the next generation.
Yeah. No, I love what you're doing, and I couldn't agree more on any of this. I'm going to edit this part out too. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover? Because I feel like we talked about everything I had in mind.
Emma, did I miss anything? I don't know.
I don't think so.
John, you think of anything else?
It seems like you guys covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, the tummy time, I wanted to mention that's super important. That, again, if you don't have good core strength, it all starts there. Okay, let me say, the one thing, it's about building the foundation.
Yeah. You
got to build the house the right way. And if you don't build it the right way, you'll be doing repairs forever. And if you build it the right way, that kid will be resilient and fly away. And it all starts in the gut, methylation pathways, those kind of things. It's about building the house the right way. And I've seen the kids who've had problems and say, okay, this is how you have to do it. But that's why when I started this foundation, it was, we have to go from pre-pregnancy to 2. Those are the 3 critical years. So I'm a pediatrician talking about this, but by the time I'm getting them, what did the OB do? Right. Yeah. So that's why I love, so my foundation, one of the first guys we honored was this guy, Dr. Fenix, because he's talking about the placenta and the womb and getting these people with methylation problems pregnant who couldn't get pregnant. And he's, those kids come out pretty amazing because he's focusing on all these things pre-pregnancy. And then I have an easier job when I get them and they're very healthy. So at that point.
That's something that a question that I've had in my head, like how that connection is made between the OB care to the because when my kid's mother was pregnant, she had her OB, and then we just got a list that was like, here's some pediatricians. But it seems like the overall care for the child really should kind of start with the pregnant mother from the OB to
yeah, but who's you're pregnant, you're eating for 2, just eat whatever. I have this one family where the mom the first 2 times just ate whatever she wanted, and the first kids were 9, 10, they were very big kids, and they had sugar issues and all that. The third kid, she ate like a high protein diet, and that kid's weight was normal. Now the first 2 kids have been struggling with their weights their whole lives because their diet was cast what mom was eating when she was pregnant. So people don't see that connection. I think that's really, but Dr. Fenix, just like what are you going to go to hospitals for? It's like they're not, they're teaching the exact opposite of what we're trying to do. And he stopped going because he would sit there and like he's giving lectures on prenatal nutrition and the residents are sitting there eating, like gummy worms and stuff. And he would lose his mind. He
were they organic gummy worms?
But it's like, you're going to go teach these women what to eat and you're eating this crap. Like he just dropped the mic left and said, I just can't deal with this anymore. But again, he questions that. He reads. The guy is just amazing in that he really wants to have the best outcomes. And he's constantly micromanaging what their vitamins are. And he goes, Mike, I eat beet chips, because of a nitric oxide and that helps better infusion to the placenta. And he tells me every year, Mike, I'm getting younger. Checks his telomeres, and I wasn't getting younger. As I was working till 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, you're seeing 50 patients a day, not sleeping. And I was like, how does this guy, I mean, he goes to Greece half the year, but again, you have to find that balance too. And I think my life was so seriously out of balance.
You're not
that
traveling to Greece enough.
So I'm definitely not. We went once when they were like 7, they had a lot of sports, but the little guys are about to go to college. So I think we'll have more time to do more of that right now. But it's, it's interesting time. You have to change. And I think that's important. You do this for a long time and the system is broken and you had to change and maybe start a different system. And I think that's where we're at right now. And I think the country's at this point where at least you're giving people a choice, And,
there's more knowledge. There's more science, more knowledge, more available information now that there's no excuse not to. We should be at the best of care, of nutrition, of everything, because we have more experience too. It's sad that the country has gotten in some bad habits, I think, and taken some bad turns, but there's no reason not to get back to what people have been doing forever.
Yeah, right. And that was the point at this conference, at this integrated conference. So these guys are pulling out slides from 25 years ago. The answers are behind us. We try to progress and go forward, but it goes back to you can't hack, how you're going to, you can't hack like breast milk. You can't hack some basic things about, our bodies are made a certain way over evolution and time. And, you can't you're messing with that too much now.
Yeah.
If we go back to some fundamental things,
you really can't. I mean, people think a label, like I was saying earlier, a label with a nutrient means the same thing. And the DHA, the omega-3s that's in breast milk is not the same triglyceride omega-3 that comes from formula where it comes from fish oil or algae. It says the same thing, but it's a different molecule.
Sure. And you're taking how many ingredients, putting them together, sourcing them from different places. This came from a formula. One of the best lectures I had was from a formula guy. Telling, just to get approval, you'd have to have one criteria. The baby has to grow.
Yeah.
And that's it. And so where they're sourcing all these things. My parents are looking at that more now. But, breast is custom made. It changes the fat content, right? Or the baby's brain grows so much that it's so fatty early on, and that changes after 6 months, and the babies naturally thin out. Whereas when you're on formula, you're having the same amount of calories, the same ingredients throughout the whole time.
The immunoglobulins that are in breast milk and the immune system. And
those HMOs we were talking about. So the formula companies are constantly putting a lot in it, but it's not the same that you're getting. And if you combine that with the right flora, that's why we use this probiotic Vivo, which is the bifido but you have to give that with breast milk. The first month, you can then colonize the gut much better, but you need the breast milk part of it with the probiotic for it to work better. And those babies, you see a big difference in their guts at that point. So again, these are some basic foundational things. So good gut health, work on that methylation, that tummy time, and and let your kids do. Let them do, so sometimes parents do a lot for their kids because then they feel better about themselves, but you're not helping that child. At the end of the day, they have to do for themselves. And,
they have to fall down and they have to pick themselves up.
That's resilience, right? So I think that's what I learned at that conference. It was just amazing part of it.
My youngest was at a soccer game this last fall, and he got knocked over, and I'm just sitting there, and he's fine. I mean, it was a hard hit. He got knocked over, and he was on the ground for a minute, and it was more than a minute, but I was like, he's fine. And all the other parents are like, he's okay. One jumped up, went around the field, and to go check on him, he's fine. And he gets up and he starts going. The coach was pulling him out. He was going to give him a break, and he's like, "No, I can play." I'm like, that's my boy. He's not only just going to get up; he's going to keep playing.
Yeah. My youngest guy had that. He plays a lot of soccer and a little bit of wrestling. He was captain this year of wrestling team, and he's wrestling against a kid who wrestles like all year round. It was just, they call them hammers. These are guys good luck when you're wrestling these guys. And he's very tall and skinny, so he's very hard to pin. So these guys are really strong. I have a hard time with them. And so I was so proud of him. He didn't, this kid pins everybody. But he ended up getting so I was proud he didn't get pinned, but the guy ended up concussing him. So I'm like, maybe you should have just given up. And so
That's
what's the
tricky.
moral of the story
I respect all
so.
wrestlers. That's just one of the hardest. But also concussions are really, really bad long term.
But we did, a bunch of hyperbaric oxygens and, get him a lot of action. You say, oh, you have action trait? The doctor who was treating him, give him a lot of action traits. So we just upped the amount of omegas. And after about 6 treatments, he was able to go back and a couple of weeks earlier, where I've seen people with concussions be out a year because you're not fixing the problem, which is the inflammation.
Yeah.
And the oxygen and the omegas will fix that. So again, you have to think out of the box with these things and not just, and I've seen some of, my daughter's teammates having concussions and they're, putting them on, blood pressure medicines or other things like that instead of actually fixing what the underlying issue is.
That's actually one of the things I would love to do. I would take any, if there's any sporting team that would just want free bottles and bottles of Accentrate, because I think that the omega-3s would support healing a lot. The omega combination has more EPA, which is associated with decreasing inflammation. So not only are you getting omega-3s, but you're getting the ones that decrease inflammation in a natural way. And, I want my kids playing tough. I want them playing sports, and head injuries do happen. And I would, support minimizing the risk as much as possible, but they gotta hit. I mean, they've got to play, and if there's a healthy way to respond to that, then I would love to.
Going on low, Tom Brady, low inflammatory diet, so he didn't have a lot of sugar. But the supplement I give, to a lot of older people, it's called Omega Pro Curcumin, which is by Nordic Natural. So it's got turmeric, fish oil, and glutathione. So everybody I put on, any older people who go on that. Like the person who does our insurance, one of the older women there, she was on my knee with her. I said, just try this. And I go there a month later. She's like, oh, I put 5 of my girlfriends on this. We all love it, And so it's just natural things that you can do to just decrease inflammation. And that's what we're all dying. It's all dying of inflammation in this country. Sugar leads to inflammation. We want to blame cholesterol for everything, but it's the sugar that really is the problem that does that. And if you're not moving, so these are things that we have to just look at what's missing from our food supply. If we can't get it now, you can say with omegas now, are you going to tell moms to eat fish when the mercury levels are kind of high? So if you're getting a purified form of it, it's almost probably safer than getting that in your diet right now.
Yeah.
I don't know what you feel about that, but I mean, that's...
it's one of those, you pick your poison, because I as far as I can tell, the amount of mercury in a lot of the natural fish has gone down some, as I understand, because people are more aware of that and trying to either change the feed or the farming. I could be wrong. Someone correct me if I am, but I do think the amount of mercury in fish now is lower than it was. It was much higher, but almost certainly the supplements now, and I think the Accentrate Omega product is the best for brain health, but the fish oil industry is way better. Nordic Naturals that you mentioned, if I needed to take fish oil, I would take that, because
that's what I give all the babies. So they go on the fish oil. There's a vitamin called agape that you use.
And they test for mercury and toxins, and they're not going to allow a lot out there that have.
I do heavy metal testing on a lot of the kids I work with, and you would see it. If it's once it was a supplement that had a lot of antimony, you could see it in there. Where you check for the kids, it was off the chart. So I don't see that.
But the omegas are so important. I don't know. I've seen intelligent people debate the difference of weighing the risk of have the fish to get the omegas. It's only a small amount of mercury, if that may, and I don't know, but that's where supplementation does fill a void. Where
it depends how your methylation and detox pathways are going. So if you're somebody who's overwhelmed, and you have autoimmune disease and you have a lot of issues, and you have to probably do less of that.
So before I tore both of my ACLs, I ran a lot and was very active, and I think I just sweat away all of the toxins because I never get sick. Yeah. My immune system is as resilient as anyone's, because with the activity, sweat, and I think. And I'm not a doctor, I could be totally making this up, but when I worked out a lot and ran a lot, so my body temperature would raise a little bit, which, is the first thing that a fever does when you have an infection, that a fever will kill off some viruses. And if I'm creating a pseudo fever by raising my body temperature with a hard workout, may have been one of the contributing factors, but I never got sick because I was always moving and eating
so
well.
you have a resilient immune system.
And then I tore my ACLs.
If you're building your muscles and all that's related, right? So, yeah. But sweating is an important part. So a lot of kids because we do a lot of like infrared sauna, and it's one way of sweating. But when you're really toxic, you don't sweat. It just all stays in. It takes a while before you get to that point where the sweating comes. That's where you release a lot of those things. So, yeah.
And I've actually read that when people do gain weight, that because you're absorbing a lot of the toxins and stuff, that when you start losing that weight, then you're actually you can go through some challenges because the toxins are now being released into your system again.
Yep. Yeah, that's
short term if you keep staying on that healthy path.
Yeah, because your fat like holds a lot of those things, and as you sort of melt the fat, it sort of releases those toxins come out. So, yeah, it's interesting. I think that was the main points I wanted to get through. But again, it's building a foundation, and I think the prevention is the best way. And I think really what you have to do is that's why I try to talk to these young kids and try these clubs in the high schools is they need to get healthy because they're like the future parents. So if they get themselves healthy, they'll be healthier in that generation. So you want to treat them as early as possible. And I think if we focus on pre-pregnancy and pregnancy part, then the kids are going to come out a lot healthier and be more resilient at the end of the day, which is I think what we all want.
Yeah.
To make a stronger, world and country, so I think those are important.
Well, I appreciated this discussion. I love your practice. I love your approach to medicine and pediatrics, and hope that a majority of the country can help change course and on the nutrition and education.
Yeah, they have to think out of the box and open their mind. And as this one, some of these marketing guys think of it very simple. It's like, here's the problem, here's a solution, right? So you have a problem, you have a solution. So we have big problems, and what are the solutions? And we need our smartest people thinking about that right now. Well, how can we fix this? And I think again, when your smartest people are not going into primary care, they're going into specialty care. That's disease. So you want everybody sick, so you fix the disease. That's not going to fix the problem. We need our smartest people going to teaching, going into primary care, because that's really the beginning. Get the young little saplings to get them healthy in the beginning, and then they'll grow into strong trees. But if you don't have that good foundation, then you're going to be dealing with that, for a lifetime.
Yeah.
So.
Well, let me know when the school gets up and running. I'd love to meet up and do this again.
But I think that would be, again, just doing brain balance, doing, like certain foods will be allowed, certain things not allowed in the school. They're going to have a greenhouse where the kids are actually growing things, and that's going to get into the kitchen where they're going to learn skills about those things. So
food comes from the ground, not the store.
But if they're part of that process, I think they'll get better, and you create a community, and that's what it comes down to, is that everyone's part of a community, and they'll be partly special needs kids and gen ed kids, and just working together. And if you start them early, a lot of those special ed kids will be even more special when they finish and have more skills and more confidence. And it takes really a village to go back. We have to go back to those days. And I think we've left that a little bit, where you need to have your superhero kids who are going to help the kids who need that. We're not raising that so much. Go back to raising virtuous kids with high character again. Then I think we'll all be in a better place.
And you're going to be doing Fall Festival again?
We do it every fall, yeah.
Okay. So, well, let me know about that too. It's been a while since I've been there.
Well, fat is good. I think that's one of the 10 things that we did. Eat healthy fats. And I think
that's
you guys
right.
always sponsored that.
That was my station. It was the healthy fats.
You weren't doing the poop station, right?
No, I was not.
The gut health, right?
So, we didn't have the probiotic then. Yeah. So I will continue to not have the probiotic.
You could always have somebody else do that. So, But all right, well,
fun.
thank you for coming. I appreciate you flying down and making this easy for me.
No, thanks for joining us.
Appreciate these guys. Thanks for hosting us.
Thank you.